Hey everybody, it's Gloria here and welcome to Getting Real with Gloria, where my journey supports yours. I am really excited today to have on a dear sort of friend and fellow grief journey traveler, Joanna Barrett here. Joanna and I actually met, God, it's got to be like 13 years or something, like it's crazy amount of time. Um,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
been a long time.
we met in a yoga studio in South Boston Yoga, actually by previously owned by David Vendetti when it was still here with us. And so David actually has a interview on this channel as well. Feel free to check that out in the YouTube channel. But Joanna and I met, and we were sort of fellow yogis, making it through life. Using yoga as a mental health practice, a spiritual practice, a physical practice. And then, life took us in different directions. She became a licensed mental health counselor. And I basically, had my own journey. And then we reconnected over our shared experience of pet loss, which was two very unique journeys, but we were brought together by that experience of just the real and raw pain, which for me happened about almost, I guess this year was 3-year angel anniversary, and for Joanna, how you're coming up on how long now?
So the end of January, our soul dog Blakey passed away. Yeah,
So
so not that long.
you're not that long. So you're like not even kind of 6 months in. So yeah, so I love when we get to have these conversations about pet loss when people are in very different parts of their journey. And we will both talk about sort of some of our experiences, and you'll see similarities and you'll also see differences. And I think that's one of the beauties of pet loss. We were just talking about this before we came on air with you, which was really the uniqueness of every grief journey. And I hope you're able to see that today as we chat. So Joanna, tell me a little bit about, let's start with your mental health counseling journey. So what brought you, why did you do this? Because I know this was kind of like not always something for you. You just sort of began a personal journey that led you here. And what happened? Why did you choose mental health counseling? And what are you finding about this career that's rewarding for you?
Well, I'll start with everything is rewarding in the career, actually, because there's little pieces of wisdom and light, even in the darkness.
Mm.
And so I found that the combination of yoga and mental health counseling saved my life. It changed me, it helped me, it supported me when I needed it most.
Mm.
And I think I've always been a healer, I've always been a helper. And I believe that this is my path. This is my second career. I had a totally different career experience, probably when you and I met,
Yeah, yeah.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I wanted to pursue psychology and went back to school and spent a lot of time in graduate
I
school.
remember when you were doing that and working the job and doing the nights and the virtual and all of that hard work.
Yeah, it was a lot, and it was what I needed at the time in my life. And I knew if I wanted to do the career that I'm passionate about, that I'm in right now, I needed to just keep working through it and keep my eye on the light at the end. And now I'm in private practice and I love it. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
And now talk a little bit about how this loss has changed your life. And actually, before you do that, talk to me about Blakey. Tell me a little bit about him. And then also tell me sort of how that loss really changed you, because I know it changed for you and also your partner.
Yeah. So Blake was adopted in 2011 by my boyfriend. This was before he and I had met. And Blake was a special dog from the very, very beginning. He had a trauma history. He was a bait dog in dog fighting. And through just miraculous intervention, showed up at an animal shelter in Massachusetts.
Wow.
And he was in the news, he was in the newspaper at the time, and stories were shared about him. And my boyfriend put in an application to adopt him. And he was 6 months old at the time. And then fast forward, I came into their lives. It was about five. Blake was probably about 5.
Show me his
And
picture. I know you have it there. Show
I
us,
do
show us. We
have-
can see his visual. There he is, smiling up.
there's Blake. So he is an American Staffordshire Terrier, part of the Pit Bull family. And he, when I came into their lives, my partner and Blake, I knew they were a package deal. And I was a little bit afraid of bigger dogs. I had grown up with smaller, like 20-pound dogs. And meeting Blake, I was like a little nervous. And I knelt down and he just started to kiss my face and I fell in love. We had so many beautiful experiences together. He loved yoga with me. We would practice together. He would watch me. I loved that. Super cuddly, sweet, adventurous. Really just a dog that was very in tune with what our needs were. So like if I was crying or I was upset, he would know and would come over to me. I mean, he was a true like emotional support.
Mm.
And he was just like the light of our lives. Our lives revolved around him.
I can attest to
Really did.
that.
Yeah. And we everything we did, it was like we worked to provide for a good life for him. And then it was a sudden illness that came on for him in January, at the end of January. And so, we have the memories, and that brings me joy and comfort and sadness
Mhm.
and anger, and I mean all the feels, right? But everything in life has changed. Like everything seems so different without him. Our routines changed, how I do my work has changed. Nothing feels like it's the same. And also nothing seems familiar. Like I look around and at our house that we live in and our neighborhood, and it's like this out of body experience. I'm like nothing has changed and everything has changed.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it is an amazing anomaly that, like you said, it's like nothing has changed and everything has changed. And from a scientific aspect, it's really interesting because we always talk about how grief really is the brain relearning the world without that loved one, whether it's a pet or a human. And so, our brain is mostly in tune with doing the same thing every day, right? Because a lot of us have routines. And so we learn these patterns, and our brain is very efficient and it loves to work off of sort of an algorithm that says if this, then that. And so every day, if you wake up and you walk out the door, it's like, oh, the brain knows you walk down this street, you take this turn. And so it's this interesting relearning where the brain actually does have to see your world fresh again because it can't go off of the old algorithm. It can't go off of the old GPS maps. So it's relearning all that. And it is really a fascinating experience. I felt the same way, taking walks like where Teddy would walk and just feeling like I'd never taken these steps before, and yet they were so familiar. Just one of the weird anomalies of grief. So tell me a little bit about the first sort of month and what that was like for you and how you survived, because you're here right now. So you did it. And so what did you do and how did you feel?
Yeah. So the weekend that Blake passed away was a challenging weekend in the fact that he was a little bit sick leading up to his passing, and it was a highly emotional time. It almost is hard to talk about it, to like go back and
Mhm.
feel into that, though it's also so needed sometimes. The first month or so, I'll say the first few days
Mhm.
were horrific.
Horrific. I can attest to that
Horrific.
as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, could not function. My boyfriend and I were devastated and didn't know what to do with ourselves. Like the world, it was a shock, and the
Mhm.
world didn't seem like how we knew it. And so we spent a lot of time together. I'm glad that we had each other
Mhm.
during that time, right? Like we weren't alone. We were with each other. I reached out to a lot of my friends and family. I was looking also for additional support
Mhm.
just because everyone knew how much Blake meant to us, and he meant so much to them too. Um, but the first few days, everything just slowed down. I slowed down. Like I slept, I rested, I sat on the couch and stared into space.
Mhm.
Um, I would sleep on and off. It was hard. I took time off of work
That was good.
because yes, as a therapist, I was not in the place to help support anyone
Mhm.
else
Mhm.
when I was going through what I was going through.
Yeah.
Um, and so I turned to what I intuitively knew would be helpful for me, crying,
Mhm.
talking with people who would understand,
Mhm.
um, not anyone who would be like, "Oh, just get over it." Right? So I reached out to people who would be supportive for me. I reached out to you, um, and I turned to a lot of different healing modalities. After maybe about a week, I started to get back into my yoga practice. I got into reading some poetry. I was writing a lot, which was very healing for me.
Mhm.
Poems and prayers and messages to Blake and from
Mhm.
Blake. Um, I spent a lot of time in nature, even though it was cold. It was February in
Yeah.
England. Um, and I went through all the feelings, right, that I needed to go through at that time, which was also hard. Um, it was like this weird ebb and flow of
Mhm.
every feeling
Mhm.
possible, even feelings that I really did not want to feel, right?
A lot of that raw pain, that raw sadness is on a level that many of us haven't ever tapped into, even if we've been, like I know you have, like a trauma survivor, you've not ever tapped into that, the sadness of that type of pain. You just really get good at coping, and you get really good at different types of survival mechanisms, that maybe you can address those feelings, and maybe you have felt like the sadness of it, but you've never actually like necessarily taken a dive into that pain. Whereas this, it's so visceral. And I think it's on a level, it's almost animalistic. It feels like, at least that's how I felt. Sort of a primal pain
Mhm.
that I had never felt before. And I know it's really interesting. I love discussing the grief journey with people because, like, you look at your journey those first couple of days, you were very almost on pause. Like, you were slow and you took more of a restorative position. Even though you were sad, you kept yourself on the couch in comfort. And then my first few days, I worked myself until I couldn't feel my body. So I wouldn't let myself rest. I was like, okay, we're going to take every to do item in the house and we're going to make it that it has to be done in the next 24 hours. And so, painting and sanding decks and making my husband fix this broken thing. And, just until I crashed and then had to accept that pain was there. So everybody's got a different way of handling those first 3 days. And I just want to put it out there that no matter how you handle it in those first 3 days, the biggest thing is support. And Joanna and I both had partners in our homes, which was helpful. If you don't have that, reach out to those people who, like you said, will understand you, or get yourself on a hotline if you need to speak with someone who is at least, licensed to help you, or get on the phone with your therapist, or get in a grief group. Do something to feel support, because no matter whether you're going to go, you know, sit on the couch in your pajamas and not shower, and which is totally cool, and just veg out and just sit in that space and either be numb, which is also okay, especially in the beginning, or cry your eyes out, or you're going to take the approach of like beating yourself up for a couple of days. No matter what approach you're taking, have support, because it will keep you from venturing into places that are unsafe for you. Because grief is, you do skirt that line, I feel like, with grief, where it's like the safety, unsafety, emotionally, physically, everything. And so just make sure you've got that support. Joanna will attest to that too, which actually I want to bring up that point. So as a mental health counselor, how did you manage, and what kind of was going on in your mind as you were like, I have to help people like put their lives together, or face these really challenging inner narratives and all this stuff while I'm also grieving? What was that like?
Yes. So I took some time off, not a great deal of time, like a few days, and I wish I would have actually taken a few more days.
Mm-hmm.
Though it was also a good distraction at the same time to be working and to
Mm-hmm.
be focusing on other people and how I could help them. What was really interesting was, of course, so many people brought up topics around grief,
Mm-hmm.
or anticipatory grief,
Mm-hmm.
because of course clients sometimes mirror or bring light to something that we're also going through. And I was able to just speak from my heart, and help people the best way that I've always known how, being a listening ear, validating emotions, sharing maybe something from my life or a loved one's life, like something anecdotal that could be
Mm-hmm.
helpful. Um, and I found that it was actually really important for me to get back to my work.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also, for some clients, I'll say I was able to share a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more about what was going on. Um, just in the sense that some clients knew I had a dog and they would always ask about him. And I didn't want to lie, right? I didn't want to not be authentic or truthful or anything like that. So I was able to share, like, he passed away, and process that, not my own feelings, but how that also impacted them and brings up their stuff too. A loss of a parent, a loss of a partner, loss of a child, loss of a pet. And so the couple of clients that I did share with were incredibly moved and touched by just this human to human experience, right? Like, I'm human too. I'm no different. I go through things
Yeah.
as well. And I don't bring my stuff into their session, though for a few clients, it was important that they knew. I also had scaled back a little. I wasn't working and seeing as many clients because I felt like my capacity
Mm-hmm.
wasn't as expansive.
Mm-hmm.
And so some clients, I had asked to reschedule appointments. I just said I had a loss in the family, and everyone was really understanding. I have amazing clients. And I think, also going through this has helped me be able to support my clients
Mm-hmm.
in a new and different way,
Mm-hmm.
um, that, you know, just sort of evolved
Yeah.
from this. It wasn't anything that I could have planned.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the sort of side effects, I think, of any kind of trial, human trial that we go through, human challenge that we go through, is that it does give us greater capacity for compassion and to validate others' feelings. So yeah, it is it is something that I find I try to look at as one of the gratitude pieces of loss, when you can. I I really love that you talked about how you took care of yourself, because I do think for a lot of people who are natural nurturers, or people who are in careers that do require them to give so much energetically to others, it's important that they realize, if you are in that type of career, you still get to take care of you. You still deserve that support. And I found that to be the case too. Even I was doing real estate in the field at that point, still full time. And so I was the same way. Like, I didn't tell everyone. I just sort of like pushed myself to go back. And I actually answered a phone call the day that we were um, going to be saying goodbye. I was like making appointments for the following couple of days, and I was like annoyed at myself for functioning that way. But at the same time, like you said, sometimes you need to do that. And so I did tell some people, and everyone that I told, that I chose, specifically, they all met me with kindness and compassion. And, even in real estate, which is a crazy competitive field, and a lot of times, in a field like that, where you have to, and there may be some of you out here in type of careers like this, where you have to really put other people's time first, because the market moves so quickly that if you are taking a day off, it means that someone else is taking your clients potentially. And so you can have that pressure to feel like you have to perform. So no matter what career you're in, just know that you deserve support and you deserve to take that time for yourself. I also took a little bit of time after. It was like a month. I think it was like 3 months later, I finally took time. But in those, beginning days of pushing, sometimes we have to push ourselves back into routine, because behavior basically begets thoughts, and that begets emotions. So sometimes we can't wait for ourselves to feel like going back to work or going back to the routine, because we might be sad or angry or feel guilt for a while. And so we can't sort of put everything else on hold, maybe because we have children, we have a job to get back to, whatever our life functions are. We have those things waiting for us. And so we have to perform. But at the same time, from a scientific aspect, there's actually a lot of resiliency that gets built in sort of this ping pong between, and I forget what the names, I wish, it's The Grieving Brain by Mary O'Connor. It's a brilliant book. And there's these two sort of aspects where you ping pong between these restorative tasks and sort of these slightly more stressful tasks, but the ping pong back and forth. So going to work, but then like coming home and watching a sad movie and crying, and then, doing something for someone else, and then, doing some nature walking for you. Like ping ponging back and forth is actually what builds resilience. And so it's great that you recognize that, hey, by going back to my routine, even though it's hard, there is also a sense here of comfort that's built into my routine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that ping pong is something that I'm recognizing now actually really did help, because I'd be helping others, I'd be supporting my boyfriend, I would be doing things for myself or asking others to help support me.
Mhm.
Um, and then, sometimes we would be doing, yeah, house projects, um, or I would be, learning something new or working, and other times relaxing, restoring, sleeping,
Sleeping.
crying, looking at pictures and videos of Blake brought us a lot of joy and a lot of sadness.
Mhm.
And we did that a lot in the evenings. Um, and then we took a vacation. We decided to go to
Ah.
Florida and lie in the sun
Mm.
at the end of that February, this past February, um, because we just needed to get away. Like life
Mhm.
it wasn't normal. It wasn't our
Yeah. Yeah.
routine. And within like 3 weeks, we had booked a trip and we just said, we're going to get away for a week and take care of ourselves, have some fun, eat good food, um, be near the water, which is so important to me, that flow
Mhm. Yeah.
of the water. Um, and when we came back, we adopted a puppy.
Aniken.
Aniken. So, who actually turns 1 next week.
Oh.
So we're planning his birthday. And it wasn't expected necessarily that we were going to adopt so soon.
Mhm.
And it was like the stars aligned just perfectly for it. And he basically fell into our laps,
Mhm.
essentially. And everything just sort of said, okay, let's do this. And so we got back from Florida, and in early March, we brought Aniken home. And it was a really challenging time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Very, very much for both of us.
Mhm.
I'd say especially me. I struggled a lot in different ways, connecting with him, understanding him, being near a puppy, training, and just deeply missing Blake.
Yeah.
And then of course it's like life is not the same with a puppy, and everything was different. So new routines,
Mhm.
new trials and tribulations, new stressors. And it impacted our lives in just new and different ways.
Did
Um,
you find that taking that trip opened you up to the fact that there was life outside of loss? Because I think sometimes we get sort of, unfortunately, our world becomes sort of smaller in some ways because we feel like without that pet or that person, that we lose a little bit of that purpose in life for many of us. And there's that hopelessness feeling, that helplessness feeling as well. And so sometimes it's hard to see outside of that perspective. Like, this just hurts, and I don't know if this is ever going to get better, and I doubt it will because I loved this pet so much. And how could it ever get better? Do you think taking that trip helped you kind of remove yourself from that place and just reset everything so that you could then come home and adopt a puppy?
yeah, I think that the trip gave us the opportunity to rest our nervous systems,
Mhm.
right? So that we could see possibilities
Yes.
for the future,
Mm.
because we weren't really able to see that prior.
Yeah.
Although before the trip, um we had seen Aniken online before the trip, and we had talked to the shelter before the trip, and we had said we're going on vacation. Like, vacation was booked, and will you hold this puppy for us until we get back? And they said yes, they would. Um, and so, also while we were away in Florida, it gave us the opportunity to think more clearly about what we would need to put in place when we got back in order to then bring home the puppy.
Yeah.
Um, and I have never had a puppy like Aniken. He is incredible. I'll say that. Smart and curious and fun and playful and cuddly and loves adventures. We discovered he loves to swim in the ocean.
Oh.
And he is a little troublemaker at times.
He's a boxer mix, right? Boxer mix, is that?
He's a boxer lab, um, called a boxador, apparently. Boxador. He also most likely has a little bit of pit bull in him. And we believe that he was sent from Blake. And my boyfriend had said if and when we adopted a dog again, he wanted it to be a black dog because black dogs don't get adopted as frequently.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be part or all pit bull, um, because they get such a bad rap. And we wanted to, also adopt a puppy that had, or a dog that had a hard upbringing, like, and give it a good home. We knew that we had so much love in our hearts and we could offer a really good home. And then all of a sudden there's Aniken. Fit the bill directly from Blake.
Oh, talk
Yes.
about, if any, the struggle with knowing that you had a lot of love in your heart, but whether or not you were ready to open that up again after the loss.
It was really hard for me. I think a part of me was hesitant to adopt a dog so soon. And the other part of me knew that it would be good for my healing and my partner's healing. And, talk about that ping pong, like going back and forth. And although I had parts that were hesitant, I also had like parts that were, let's do this. Aniken had 2 surgeries for a broken leg and had been surrendered by his previous owner. And we just felt like, this little one deserves a great life, and we can give that to him. And so, opening my heart again was emotional, and I got frustrated. I learned so much about myself. Those first couple of weeks, especially, I learned how frustrated I can get and how imperfect I am, and that every now and then I can yell and be angry. I learned a lot about life, a lot about myself in those first few weeks of adjusting. I think we're still all adjusting, right? And will be for a while. Though when I look, like last night, for instance, we were on the couch and Aniken was like cuddled into me like a baby. And I looked at him and I just had this like sense of peace. And I was like, he knows this is his home.
Yeah. It's a beautiful feeling when you see that. Like my guy, I have Coors, my cattle dog, and we rescued him as well. And he was our foster dog, but he was with us for a year. And anyway, we adopted him right before Teddy passed. And I do feel that way, like that he chose us. And it's such an amazing feeling when you see them really loving their home and loving their environment. And that they're just feeling their immense joy. It's like the best thing. I'm sure it's what also people maybe feel when they look at babies who are also feeling immense joy. It's just this innocent being that's full of life and full of love and full of all of the goodness. And then just they're like, this is it. This is the best it gets with such simple pleasures. So
Yeah.
it really is beautiful.
Yeah. And we also, one of the things that I felt early on was a disconnection from Aniken. I felt that with Blake, I was his mom.
Yeah.
And I considered myself a dog mom. And with Aniken, I struggled with that identity. And I just felt disconnected. I also had probably like a little bit of a underlying depression. And so I was very like hot and cold in my behavior and how I was feeling. And Aniken could sense that, and he knew that. And so he was hot and cold towards me. Sometimes he'd be so loving and so sweet and cuddly. And other times he'd be like barking at me or nipping or running around as puppies do. Right. And, or chewing on something that he wasn't supposed to, for instance. And I realized when I was able to recognize the best ways to help myself kind of get grounded and settled, Aniken responded well to that too.
They do. They pick up so much, more so than humans. Pick up so much on what's going on for us internally. And I found that even like just outside of grief, like my own anxiety, as I do a better job managing that, and as that doesn't take full center stage in my life, Cora's anxiety also goes down. And he is so much happier and so much more confident in seeing me also more confident in myself. And so there is that beautiful balance that we influence our dogs influence us. And it's this, beautiful cycle. How has, you're sort of about 6 months, right? January, February, March, April, May, June. Yeah. About How does it feel different right now for you than it did in the beginning with grief?
with grief. I feel that it doesn't have such a heavy weight
Mhm.
on me in this moment anyway. I think it is an ebb and flow. And early on, I dove into a lot of, I'll say, practices I thought would help me.
Mhm.
I was reading, I was writing, I was doing yoga, I was meditating, I was taking walks on the beach, I was allowing myself to cry. I joined support groups.
Mhm.
And what I found was over time, I was able to lessen the intensity of all of that,
Yeah.
right? And kind of live more in my everyday life.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I see Blakey's urn every day. We have an altar space set up for him in the living room. And every now and then I'll talk to him. I say good morning or good night. Um, we celebrated his birthday a few weeks ago, what would have been his 12th birthday. Um, and I just feel like now it doesn't have that heavy weight.
Mhm.
I think at some point it might,
Mhm.
right? And in this moment, I'm really grateful also for his legacy
Mm.
and for bringing us Aniken.
Mm.
And I feel a lot of gratitude. Yeah.
Talk about, because I know you set up a foundation for him. Talk about the foundation and what that's meant to you, and why that's been important.
Yeah. So we, and I say we, although it was me, had the idea to set up a fund to help pit bulls get adopted. And so how the sort of played out was I also wanted to do something to surprise my boyfriend and help him and help keep Blake's legacy alive. So after he passed away really unexpectedly from heart failure in January, I had this idea for a memorial fund and to have his legacy live on to help other pit bulls.
Mm.
And the idea was that the shelter where Blake came from, where he was adopted from, um, they get pit bulls in for adoptions regularly, and sometimes they're overlooked. They're, they tend to be a misunderstood breed, or although they're actually more of a several breeds. Um, and so in my heart, I I really got the sense that this was coming from Blake, that he wanted to help other dogs.
Mm.
So I reached out to the shelter, said I would like to start the Blake Ross Memorial Fund for pit bulls. And the shelter is Second Chance Animal Services in Massachusetts. And they remember Blake's story because he was in
Oh.
the news. Blake was famous. I mean, and he had followers and loved ones from all over the world.
Wow.
And so they were on board with this. And I said, I'll do some of the marketing and some of the fundraising. I will donate an initial amount to get this started and off the ground. And what I would like to do is reduce the adoption fee if a family or anyone really wants to adopt a pit bull and they are, screened and background checked and they're a
Yeah.
good fit for this dog. And also hopefully help them with their medical costs as well so that they can be prepped for adoption. And the shelter loved it. I loved it. It was like a secretive project that I was working on. So it let me channel a lot of my feelings
Mm.
into a project
Into
that,
doing. Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
really meant something to me.
Mm.
Um, And so the fund was started. It got some attention. There were donations. It was still kept under wraps. The website was not yet live. There was no promotion about it. But some people within my networks knew about it. And Second Chance had a benefit dinner
Oh,
at the end of March. And at the dinner, there was a video of Blake
oh,
and announcing the Blake Ross Memorial Fund for Pit Bulls. And so there were donors from the dinner that night. My boyfriend found out about it, was
oh, wow.
surprised. We both cried in front of like 300 people at the dinner event. Um, and then on what would have been Blake's birthday, just a few weeks ago, we did another like promotion to ask for donations. And the fund has helped pit bulls at Second Chance Animal
Oh,
Services.
yay.
A really cute little girl named Darla was the first pit bull that was helped by
Oh,
Blake's fund. So
that's
um,
lovely. And now how, like, if somebody wants to do this for their dog or their cat or any pet that's passed, what can they do? How can they get the first steps rolling? What should they do?
well, I would say either contact like a shelter where they came from,
Mhm.
let's say, or a local shelter, right? Like where I live outside of Boston, there's probably like 3 or 4 big name local shelters. I chose the one that Blake came from,
Right.
and that's where Aniken came from too.
Oh,
The same shelter. Um, but just get in touch with them and say, my beloved soul animal has passed, and I would like, to help create a fund in their name to help others be adopted or medical care.
mhm.
You can have it be restricted funds. You can have it be specifically for adoption fees or medical costs or various things. I didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of made it up as I went along. Luckily, Second Chance Animal Services, though they have never done this specifically, they do have a director of development who does fundraising
Right.
and was kind of aware of how to do this. So I worked with several people, including someone that created a web page and marketing for this, the development director, the head of the shelter, like the CEO, and just kind of put it together. So I think it's a lovely idea if anyone wants to
It
do it.
is.
I also think there's some unique ways of also honoring,
What are
right?
those?
Um, I mean, we created an altar space, which has Blake's bowl and collar and the paw prints and his urn, couple of candles, a space that's his. Um, Another way of honoring could be writing a book, right? How
Wait,
you did
yep,
for Teddy.
yep.
Um, I wrote a lot of poetry and I shared it with loved ones on social media, right? Or in pet loss support groups.
Mhm.
Um,
You adopted a dog. It's one way to honor, right? Adopt
one of
another
the-
pet, share your love.
yes. And I know some people get tattoos, which my
Mhm.
boyfriend is considering.
I have been considering for since Teddy passed, and if
Yeah.
I weren't so darn afraid of needles and had a million allergies, I would have already had it done. I don't know if I'll ever get it done, but I do. I'm so in love with that idea, just having a permanent marker on your body. But yeah, I know a lot of people do go that route.
Yes, he is considering putting Blake's paw print on the right side of his calf because that is the side that Blake would walk on,
Oh,
and then putting his either nose print or his face over his heart. So, so tattoos, jewelry
mm-hmm.
is a good way of going to with their picture, or some do their ashes.
Yeah.
Um, I had Blake's paw print. I made these cards.
Very
I also
nice.
had Blake's paw print engraved onto a keychain. Um,
And I had my Teddy done on here. That's drawn by Travis, my husband, Teddy's paw print.
yeah. And we had canvases made. They're downstairs in
Mhm.
our living
Same.
room,
Yep.
like big
Yep.
canvases.
Same.
Um, and I also think there's really charitable ways of supporting. You could do
Mhm.
a, a food drive,
Yep.
or, a shelter.
Yep.
You could collect blankets and towels. We had cleaned out our like old bath towels and some blankets that we didn't want to keep anymore. We did a donation.
Yeah, I did that with Teddy's medication after he passed because a lot of shelters and foster rescue organizations do need that medication. So I passed that along with some of his food and other things that we couldn't use for cores. So it does feel good to do that and know you're helping other dogs. And fostering also is a great way to do that too, or helping out with an adoption organization and doing events and stuff. A lot of people think they can only, either have a foster in their house or they can't help. And there's lots of things you can do, driving dogs to vet appointments or picking dogs up from quarantine and bringing them to their fosters or helping with meet and greets or adoption events. There's so much you can do.
Yeah. And I think, even just seeing what you have that you can bring to a shelter, or calling a shelter or looking online, many of them have their needs, like their lists of
Yes.
what they
Yeah.
need on their website.
Yeah.
And they need paper towels, they need cleaning supplies, right? Like, you might have some of that stuff unopened, or if they'll take something that it has been used, but you could also, you know, drop off a couple rolls of paper towels and
Yeah.
just, that's what you do. Um, we did also a gift basket for as an auction item, and in it we put Blake's favorite treats,
Oh,
and some of the stuff that he had that we had that wasn't open. Um, there's lots of ways, and I think there's also creative ideas. There's local artists kind of all over. I've seen them online that will do portraits,
mhm.
right? You send them a picture of your beloved pet, and they'll do like a watercolor, or a charcoal sketch of your pet, and they look really good. I've looked
And
into
yeah,
some
and
of
you're
them.
supporting the artist as well. So it's
Yes.
like a double give, which is nice. I did a garden. So that was something that I did after Teddy passed. I'd never had a garden before, but I started gardening it every year. That now I do that. And he has a memorial stone in our yard as well. There's all these things. Why do you think honoring and like sort of doing these little memorials, why does this make grief not hurt so much when we do these things?
Mhm. I think helping others helps us,
Mm,
and knowing that your loved one's legacy is supporting and helping others in some way, even if it's the beauty of the garden,
right.
right? We have a hibiscus plant in the
Oh,
backyard that is Blakey's
beautiful.
plant.
Oh,
And whenever it blooms open, it brings us joy, right? That's his flower. Um, I think when we devote ourselves to a project or something that is a passion project for us, it helps us along the healing journey. It gives us something not only to focus on, like in our mind, but a place to give the energy from our
yeah.
hearts. Um, I think a garden is amazing. So you're also putting your hands in the
Yeah, I
soil,
love
and
that. Yeah.
seeing something through,
Mhm.
right? Like, you plant the seeds, you water it, you fertilize it, you watch it grow.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was sort of what I did with the memorial fund,
Mhm.
like, to get it up and running.
Yeah.
And, to help others. And for us, I'm grateful that we were able to adopt another dog, which I know isn't the case for everyone. And it's a big decision.
Yeah. And a big commitment. Yeah.
It's a huge
Yeah.
commitment.
And everyone's ready in different times when that happens, whether it's like what you did, where you felt like it was short, but it was the right time for you. Some people need a year, or they need multiple years. There's no timeline there that is the right time. And the same thing goes for grief in general. Just there's no one way to do this. There's no one pathway that you have to go down. There's, oh, if you're not doing this or feeling these feelings, that means you're not doing it right. Everything is going to be such a unique journey. And I actually want to ask you about, because I know we were talking about this before and I want to bring it up now. So in this now 6 month almost period, you've come to realize that the urn is not, it's not serving you. And which is this really, a fascinating component of the grief journey, I think, is where we have these markers along the way where we reevaluate what's working for us. And sometimes it's changing the altar or changing the memorial space or switching up what you're doing to honor. I did the first year, I did an online, like, sort of collage of Teddy, and I shared it with a bunch of people and sort of a type of memorial service. But I didn't feel like I had to do that the second year. Instead, I did a YouTube, or actually this year I did the YouTube video. I don't remember what I did last year, something, I'm sure. So there's this weird like progression that happens, this sort of metamorphosis of the things that bring us comfort and bring us joy that changes along the way. Tell me about the urn and how that's changed for you.
Yeah. So, well, actually, even right from when we got the urn, which was probably, I don't know, a week after he passed, we didn't quite like the look of it. It was just, it didn't bring out the vibrancy of Blake. And it was just, dark and also small. And we were like, he was like a 65-pound dog. Okay, he's all in there. But I also felt into like he liked space. He liked to sprawl out, right? And so we considered getting something a little larger and something that looked different. And I looked online. I looked on Amazon. I looked on Etsy. I looked on different like memorial sites for ideas, and I couldn't find anything that I loved.
Mm.
And my boyfriend had said, see what you like and then bring it to him to see if he liked it. Was like some options, like narrow it down. I didn't find anything that I liked because nothing spoke to me that said this represents Blake. So I got the idea to contact an artist and to customize an urn. I thought it might have been either the weirdest request that he had ever heard, or maybe it was one that he got every day. I don't know. Contacted him. We had a few emails back and forth. I was surprised I heard back, actually. Because he is a worldwide, like, famous artist. And I gave a little bit about Blake's life and why this was important to me and to us and to honor Blake. And I said, we want bright, vibrant colors. And I said, if I am able to send you, he's in New York, I'm in Boston, if I'm able to send you a brand new urn, what does it need to be made out of? What color should it be? How do I ship it to you? So if anyone out there is listening and wants to kind of do this with their favorite artist, it's possible. And he told me what would be needed. And we're going to go pick up the new customized art piece this summer. So
Very cool. Very cool.
yeah, and we'll probably ask the cremation place if they will transfer Blake for us. I'm not exactly sure how to crack open the urn that he's in right now. And also I don't want to risk damaging anything, right? So I still have to get in contact with them, but that's the next step.
Well, I love that you made it your own, and you were reevaluating, where you stand and how you feel about things and what's going to bring you joy throughout this process and what's going to bring you healing throughout the process, and how you're growing throughout the process. And as we grow, we're going to need different things, right? We're going to need, to have more vibrancy in our lives and have different things surrounding us. And I know for me, I've just been thinking about, I was just telling you this, I've been thinking about my urn, which also is sort of like the traditional black, with the silver paw prints. And like, I never quite, you know, really adapted to it. Like it's in my house. It's never been prominently displayed. It's always been like with my wedding flowers, actually, like tucked away in this sort of box where you can kind of see it, but you kind of can't. And lately I've been thinking like, I'm ready to let this go. And, there's this guilt of like, but, oh, but like that's him. And, like you have to keep this because, remember when you got it and how that was and all this stuff. But I think when we let go of what we think the rules have to be, it's when we have the most freedom and we can honor our pets the way they really want to be honored. And so I've been now doing this like these little pilgrimages where I've been taking his ashes, and I did spread a bunch in the beginning in the first year. The second year I also did a little bit more, and then this year I'm doing the rest. And it's a little scary to think about letting all of that go, because originally my plan was like hold on to that and bring it to the next house and the next house and like always have a piece of Teddy. But I realized, for me, and everyone's journey is going to be different, but for me, I was like, I don't need this to bring him with me because I feel very secure about that he's already here. And a lot of what I'm doing in my life, like this YouTube channel, is for him. This is how I'm honoring him. And so I've decided that once I scatter everything, I will bury it in the backyard in the house where Teddy was last. And so it's really fascinating to me to see sort of how two people who have experienced grief and who have loved with every fiber in their being, how they're just even handling the urn, this thing that's commonplace of, between us, but yet we've done it so differently. And I just encourage people to honor whatever you're feeling is right for you, and letting go of any stigma of like, well, this is what I have to do because this is how this other person did it. This is how everyone's told me it's going to go. That's going to be the same way with just how you feel along the journey and the things that you do and your behavior along the journey. It's going to be unique to you. And I think when you recognize that, it's when you give yourself also the greatest capability of living a rich life again. There is richness after loss, but it takes a little time to get there. And it's going to take a different amount of time for all of us. Is there
Yeah.
anything else, you want to talk about
Yeah.
or say or offer for advice for anybody out there listening?
Well, I'll also add on what you said. I totally agree with, and it can come and go,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Like the emotions,
Hmm.
we want to feel the whole range of emotions because that's a lot of times what's needed
Yeah,
as part of our healing journey in a safe space. And they come and go, right? And it's all temporary. And there's no, just linear growth through
no,
this.
nope.
It's all over the place sometimes. And I think everyone is different in how they grieve
Yeah,
and the grieving process, and to honor what's true for you,
yeah,
and to honor that you might have a friend who's grieving in a little bit of a different way than what you are,
yeah,
right? Or, I know someone who recently lost a parent, and their grief, my grief, and there's no comparison, there's
no,
no
no,
contrast. It just is what it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Um, and so that's why I think finding the support network that works
Mhm.
best for you is so helpful for
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
Um, a therapist, a group, hopefully some friends or family or coworkers or someone.
yeah,
Um, a lot of vet clinics have support groups, I believe,
yeah,
or have connections that can help like hook people up with support groups. Um, and then I think, you find your people.
yeah. It's very true.
Mhm.
And I know that for me, that was huge, especially in the first year. And Kelly's support group, which Kelly I've interviewed on this channel as well, and you can find that video on this page too. That was just huge for me in navigating and in feeling like there was hope again. Because sometimes, again, you can't really see that in the beginning. And so knowing that there was a rich life there at some point, and then knowing how to integrate Teddy into the new world where his physical presence wasn't here, making that transition. I think that's what's helpful for those groups as well, because it's a big undertaking that you're doing to do that. Is there anything that you sort of recommend other than support? Is there anything that's helped you, like skill or tool wise or resource or practice wise, that you feel like above all else, like this is the thing that you continue to lean on?
Yes, music.
Oh
Music
yeah.
is
Yeah.
huge for me.
Mm.
So probably a few days after Blake had passed, I noticed that I was listening to the same songs. And so I created a playlist on Spotify,
Oh.
and I have um a grief playlist. What I have found is that I still add songs to it. It's
Mm.
not all sad songs,
Right.
right? It's a whole mix now of different music that reminds me of
Mhm.
him, or music that like I used in reels or in videos of him, or lyrics that seem to resonate in some way with his life or his passing. Um, so music
Love that.
has
I
been
love that.
huge.
I
And
love the
dancing,
playlist. It's a
yeah, the
playlist is
playlist.
great. Oh my God, I love it.
The
Uh,
playlist, singing,
yeah.
dancing, all that is what's helpful. Um, I still read poetry.
Mm.
Sometimes I read the same ones over and over because they resonate. I have a couple favorite authors of poetry books for loss that just, it's like they're speaking to me. And I have over here on my bookshelf some journals and grief books. And I got a journal,
Oh,
and
how beautiful that is.
this is my grief journal.
It's
Um,
beautiful.
that I write my poetry and
Mhm.
prayers and my connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one of those too. I have a black moleskin someone gave me, and I didn't know what to do with it for the longest time. And then when Teddy passed, it was the place where I wrote to him. And I wrote a lot of poetry and a lot of just like feelings. And so that's my Teddy journal. And not as brightly colored as yours. But it definitely helped me too to put those feelings to paper and to keep talking to him, because I had done so for 14 and a half years. It's just very weird to just stop that out of nowhere. So to keep that line of communication going in the way that best served me, that's kind of, I did the same thing. And I'm anybody that's on my Instagram page knows I've written plenty of poems about Teddy and about grief in general, just that process. And I do find poetry to be a great outlet for that. I think creativity, the beauty about using creativity in grief is that creativity is born from like the energetic source of life that we are, and ultimately that our pets are. So in a way, it's almost like we get to revive them by being creative, because all that energy is the same. So that's what I love about it. It's like universal concept. It was a pleasure having you today and speaking to you about pet loss. Thank you so much for being open about your struggles and your wins too, of like where you've really started to thrive, and um, how you've come, how far you've come in just a short period of time. And I'm sure you'll continue to transform, as we all do. um,
Yes, and thank you. And I, have looked up to you as someone who I can turn to for support and to kind of navigate this path that I had never really been on before. And it's like you turn to those who have come before you. And so thank you for being a guide for
Oh,
me.
thanks. It's I feel like one of my life's purposes at this point is helping to be a guide for those who are experiencing grief and have, dealt with loss, especially of a soul animal or a heart dog, or, um, where can people find you? So I know we're going to put all this in the description, but where can people find you if they want to work with you as a mental health counselor, or they just want to connect with you for yoga or whatever else?
Mhm. Yep. So my website, which is joannabarrett.com. I am on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, Joanna Barrett Therapy. And then the Blake Ross Memorial Fund is at Second Chance Animal Services in Massachusetts. There is another Second Chance somewhere else. out in the world. So the one in Massachusetts, they have a website, and they have the link to Blake's memorial. Yeah, there's our guy.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you
So
so much. I'll put all that in the description. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much, Joanna.
thank you, Gloria. Be well.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. I hope to see you back here soon.